Good morning, students. So, we have started to discuss about the third chapter of geography, that is, our changing earth. In this chapter, till now, we have discussed about the lithospheric plates, as well as we have discussed about the endogenic forces, exogenic forces. Then, we have also discussed the figure 3.1, that is, uh, the two type of forces are there which are causing inside the earth and outside the earth, and these are endogenic forces and exogenic forces. What kind of things are getting generated or taking place onto the surface of the earth, that we have seen with the help of this. Then we have also tried to understand what are the earthquakes and volcanoes, how they are taking place on the surface of the earth. Then about the earthquake and the volcano we have understood, and now we are going to see further into this next part of the chapter. So here we are going to understand major landforms. So as we have discussed about the uh, endogenic forces and exogenic forces, with the help of these endogenic and exogenic forces, the different kind of landforms have formed. Now in this point we are going to understand that what kind of landforms have formed due to the exogenic forces of the earth. So the landscape is being continuously worn away by two processes, weathering and erosion. Weathering is the breaking up of the rock on the earth's surface. Erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like water, wind, and ice. The eroded material is carried away or transported by water, wind, etc., and eventually deposited. This process of erosion and deposition create different landforms on the surface of the earth. So here it is said that there are two kind of things which are forming the different kind of landforms onto the surface of the earth. These are weathering and erosion. So weathering is what? Weathering is breaking up of the rocks on the surface of the earth, when due to the changes in the temperature or into the changing temperature, rainfall and all that, the different form of the moisture is there in the atmosphere. Due to all these chemical and physical changes, the rocks are breaking up, and then they are breaking into the small fragments. This process is called as the weathering. So weathering is the breaking up of rocks on the surface of the earth. And what is erosion basically? Erosion is what? Erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents. What kind of agents these are? Um, like water is there, wind is there, ice is there. When the water, wind, and ice, these three agents are acting upon the different landforms or different parts of the land, these lands are getting wearing or eroded, and this eroded material then carried up away or transported by the water, wind, etc., and eventually they are getting deposited to some other place. And from this also the different kind of landforms are forming. This process of erosion and deposition create different landforms on the surface of the earth, and in this way these two processes, that are weathering and erosion, are the two exogenic forces which are acting upon the surface of the earth. Now first of all we are going to see the work of a river. Work of a river. The running water in the river erodes the landscape when the river tumbles at the steep angle over very hard rocks or down a steep valley side. It forms a waterfall. So here the picture of the waterfall is shown. Now how the waterfall is forming? The waterfall is normally forming when the river erodes the landscape, when the running water in the river erodes the landscape. When this running river tumbles means falls from the steep angle. When this river falls or tumbles at the steep angle over very hard rocks or down a steep valley, um, it forms the waterfall. Now here in this picture you can see when such kind of rocks are forming, when such kind of waterfalls are forming, when hard rock and softer rock are, we can say, the layered one upon each other. On the top, when there is hard rock, down of that there is, just beneath of that there is soft rock, and when these hard and soft rocks are cutting due to the work of the water, these kind of waterfalls are forming. Now here we are going to see the another part of the work of the river. As the river enters in the plain region, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. So, when the rivers are twist and turn like a snake, as you can see here, this kind of uh, twist and turns are forming the meanders. These bends of the rivers are called as the meanders, and this is happening because of what? Due to continuous erosion and deposition along the sides of meander. You know very well, when the water continuously flows into the in this region, then due to the continuous erosion and the deposition along the side of the meanders, as you can see here, these are the meanders. So side to side by side the meanders, you can see there are some depositions and there are some work of erosion along with these meanders. So this kind of erosion and deposition along the sides of meander, the end of the meander loop come closer and closer. When continuous erosion goes on, the of loop of the meander come closer and closer. This loop, as you can see here, this loop comes closer and closer, and in this way, in due course of time, the meander loop cuts off from the river and forms a cut-off lake. And this cut-off lake is also called as oxbow lake. When these kind of loops are completely cutting out, and then when these loops are forming such kind of small lakes, these kind of lakes are called as the cut-off lakes, or these are also called as oxbow lakes. These kind of oxbow lakes are forming from the continuous erosion of the river, continuous erosion of the river course at the place of the meander, and then this kind of oxbow lakes are forming. At times, the river overflows its banks. This leads to the flooding of the neighboring areas. As it floods, it deposits layers of fine soil and other material called sediments along its banks. This leads to the formation of flat, fertile floodplain. The raised banks are called levees. As the river approaches the sea, the speed of flowing water decreases and the river begins to break up into number of streams called distributors. The river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load. Each distributary forms its own mouth. The collection of sediments from all the mouths from a delta forms a delta. So, as you can see here, at times when the rivers are getting overflowed, its banks, means when the rivers are getting huge amount of water, the river overflows its banks, means it goes, the water of the river goes outside the banks, and this leads to the flooding of the neighboring areas. means in the neighboring areas of the river it start to get the flood, and as it floods it deposits layers of fine soil that is coming from the long distance, from the we can say from the long course of the river as well as from the mountainous areas. These soils layers are getting deposited one by one, and from this fine soil the floodplains are forming, and these floodplains are very fertile. And fertile means what? It is very helpful for the for doing the agriculture over there. So this kind of floodplains are very helpful for growing the crops. So as you can see, this whole course side by side around the along with the river is a floodplain, and in this floodplain the soil is very fertile, and the agriculturalists or the farmers are growing the crops over there, and they get the huge amount of production. The raised banks are called levees. So as you can see, the side by side the raised banks of the river are called as the levees, as you can see here. As you can see, this raised banks of the river, sides of the river, these are called as the levees. As the river approaches near the sea, what happens? The speed of the flowing water decreases completely, and when the speed of the flowing water decreases, this start to deposit the erode material or very fine soil at the mouth of the river. And then what happened, due to deposition of the this very fine soil at the mouth of the river, it forms the delta. And when the deltas are forming, automatically these deltas are breaking the one stream of the river water into numerous or number of channels. These number of channels of the river are called as the distributors. As you can see here, this is the main river which is coming at the mouth of the river, and this main river, when it is getting very slow, it deposits the fine soil at the mouth of the river, and they form the delta. These small parts of the soil that is deposited at the mouth of the river, these are all called as the deltas. So when these deltas are forming, it divides or breaks the river into number of channels, and these channels of the river are called as the floodplains. So these are called as the distributaries. So now we have seen that how the distributaries or the main river deposits the soil and forms the delta. These all the things we have seen. In the next period we are going to see further. Till then, thank you very much.